And now, joining us live from Boston, Massachusetts and Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, it's Claire Hollenbeck and Trevor Gordon Hall.
Hey, welcome to JamPlay Live. I'm here tonight with Trevor Gordon Hall. How you doing, Trevor?
I'm good. How are you doing, Claire?
Good, very good. And we have a great audience on the line. Make sure you get in the chat. We've seen some chat even before this show. I want to let you know that this is the first time we're doing JamPlay Live, and we're trying to skate over some technical stuff, but it's going to be a great show. And hey, Trevor, where are you broadcasting from there?
I am outside of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and now winter has finally hit us here. It was warm earlier this week, but now it's cold, and I like that because that's what it should be in December.
Okay. And is this your studio, or tell us where you're broadcasting from?
Yeah, so this is like if you see on Pinterest, they have the she sheds or the man caves. This is sort of a hybrid model I designed.
Yeah, is your he shed? Is that
it's my he shed? Yes, yeah. And so I have it's basically it's a 10 by 12 shed, and then I got some high windows in the back, and so just design the space so I'd have something that's helps me super focus for creating, practicing everything. And so since I've had this space, it's awesome because I'm not battling other noises or trying to wake up people or anything. It's nice to have a home base for all of my musical doings.
Nice. And is that the place you kind of, when you're in a writing mood, do you go out to the shed and just be by yourself, or what's your kind of process for getting into
I
it?
do. I tend to work early in the mornings. So I have a daughter who's 5, and once she was born, I started, instead of doing late night, I started waking up earlier and earlier to try to get a solid chunk. And because you still get that sort of, it feels like the middle of the night, even though it's early in the morning. So you still get that sort of quiet. But yeah, I kind of have like a daily routine, and I come out to the shed, and sometimes it's rehearsing, when we didn't have a pandemic and I was getting ready for tour, I would be rehearsing, but otherwise it's writing and recording, mixing, and it's kind of the all-purpose personal space, I guess.
Nice.
Yeah.
Really nice. Hey, show us your Kalimbatar. Do you have that out there to show folks? Because we're going to be listening to that tune in a few minutes. And
here we go.
Oh, so there we go. Okay.
Yeah. So I have this actually attaches to my guitar. And the one you see in the video is this one, but the one that is on the YouTube version of this I released, I guess 2011 now. I feel old. It was a different one that I had on a different guitar that was sort of stuck on top. This one actually sits free floating on from the guitar itself. So there's a little,
I see.
Yeah, a little airspace, but it's 26 keys, and that resonates through the guitar. And so you'll hear what that sounds like.
Very cool. And show us that you have a quarter inch input in there too.
I do. I got this company K&K to build me a custom pickup, and there's a couple of discs that pick up different spots inside. And this is my own design. I designed this with Sheldon Schwartz, and I came up with this little wedge design so that when it's on the guitar, I actually see the keys facing towards me, whereas my previous one, they were kind of up in the air, and so I had to reach over to play. But there you go.
So give us a few plucks. We'll hear what it sounds like without the benefit of the guitar. Love that resonance.
I love that.
Nice.
I searched everywhere for the right steel, and this was literally, a long piece of steel. We cut and shaped each of the keys, and as soon as we got this, all hooked up, and I hit the keys, I was like, "We're done. There it is. That's it. It's done."
That's great. That's great. Well, we're going to be listening to Trevor's tune in just a few minutes, and I want to let you know a little bit about this show. So we're going to be talking and finding out about Trevor's process, certainly hearing some awesome music, and then throughout the show, we're going to have some giveaways, and at the end of the show, we're going to also give a big discount on JamPlay. So good stuff coming up.
Cool.
So I have some producers on the line. Producers, is it time to give a try for our first segment? All right, let's do it. Let's listen to Trevor Gordon Hall. Hey, so that was the track Kalimbatar, and I'm here with Trevor Gordon Hall tonight at JamPlay Live. Trevor, tell us about that track. Tell us about, so you showed us your invention, right? With the kalimba on the guitar before. How did you come up with that? What made you want to do that?
Well, I've always loved the sound, playing guitar, a resonating string is a sound that I've loved, obviously. But, I played piano a little bit as a kid, but I always loved the sound of like the Fender Rhodes pianos that had that
Mm-hmm.
mellow, kind of ringing metal kind of tone.
Yep.
Handbells, wind chimes, that whole sound of vibraphone, I really love the sound of that. And so, um, I never thought I could incorporate it into my own sound because I was a guitar player, but I went to an African art exhibit at the Philadelphia Art Museum. That's when you run up the Rocky Steps, and everybody does that
Uh-huh.
every time you go
Right,
there.
exactly.
And I saw someone playing a kalimba, and usually it's you play it with your thumbs, and it's handheld, and there's each different there's so many different versions of it. From the start of the kalimba traditions back in Africa, it was an instrument of evolution. Everyone had a
Mm.
sort of different take on it, and so I sort of stumbled into that kalimba tradition without realizing it, because I started looking. I bought a kalimba, and it was very quiet after I saw it at the art museum, and then I just started thinking, what if I wanted a more expanded one? And I Googled everywhere and realized I had to start kind of designing some. And I built my first one. I started the project with Dick Boak from Martin Guitar, and then went to a great builder named Mike Haney, and we built a few. And then I finished this one with a great luthier in Toronto named Sheldon Schwartz. And he's sort of this mystical guy who walks 3 inches above the ground. His brain is amazing.
Okay, so let's give away some of Trevor Gordon Hall's music. He has brought we have two USB sticks. And this is how many albums of your music are on these?
So there's ten albums on here. So a whole bunch of
A
tunes, but I
lot.
also have performance videos and guitar tabs.
Oh,
And
that's
so
great. That's
this is kind
awesome.
of like the everything kitchen sink in a USB.
Nice. Nice. All right. And so my producers have drawn some names out of the hat. And so I'd like to congratulate Jeffrey Orlek and Pam Margetson. 2 thumb drives for you. We're going to be contacting you, and will send these to you. These are awesome gifts, by the way. If you, Trevor has these on his website, so feel free to visit if you'd like your own. Really terrific gift for somebody.
Thank you.
Yeah, excellent. Well, thank you. All right. So I wonder, Trevor, should we go to you live? Should we go to you playing live if our conversational video is pretty smooth? I want to ask
I can
the
try it.
producers how it's going.
I don't know if I have all the right pedals set up. I can try it. So you want to give it a
Or
whirl?
the guitar you were playing during sound check sounded just
Okay.
awesome. All right. All right. What would you like to play for us?
Well, I'm debating if I should, because we had the pre-recorded, or if I should try a different tune, just because I don't have all the other effects set up right now. I guess it doesn't matter. We could go either way.
Yeah, either way.
Okay, so I'll play this. This is an old favorite that I just always enjoy playing this, and when I have a nice reverb, I'll play this. This is called "The Meeting at the Window." Hope you enjoy.
Wow, that was just beautiful.
Thank you.
Hey, so I want to ask you a few things. First of all, I want to hear the story about the meeting at the window and how that came to be. And second, I'm reading the chat, and so many folks are commenting on your ability to stretch,
Ah,
right? And the work it takes to do that. So maybe first start with that kind of physical
sure,
thing that you're
sure.
doing, and then move to the story.
Well, when I first started to play, like, an F power chord,
Yeah.
back when I was getting started, the thought of reaching the third finger all the way up to the third fret here was like, I did not understand it at all. It didn't make any sense. And, some guitar players, if you see like Steve Vai or, other guitar players I knew when I was a kid had these really long fingers. And I thought because I don't have super long fingers, maybe I just won't be able to do some of those stretches. But then I came up against bar chords, and bar chords to me
Mm,
were so difficult that I decided if I could find other ways to play some of those. So, for example, if I were to play like a C power chord here, let me unmute this. Or, sorry, a C bar chord.
yep.
Instead of doing that bar chord shape, I learned to sort of reach, and I would rather do a little bit of the stretch rather than a bar because that I was avoiding it, at that
Ah,
time. But that gave me a little bit more of a warmer sound, and so I sort of just went in that direction. And now I've made peace with bar chords now, and have some stuff in the JamPlay course to talk about that. um, but I realized it was a lot of the thumb position. A lot of what
oh,
inhibits us
hmm,
from reaching is not necessarily, okay, you don't have the longest fingers, it doesn't matter. It's actually kind of just making sure that your thumb is just dropped down a little bit more in the neck, and that rotates your
mhm,
wrist and gives you a little bit more reach. And so,
mhm.
yes, it can be a struggle to get some of those stretches, but it's once you arrive at some of those stretches and hold it just long enough to get it without buzzing, it's like it's worth the effort because some of those chords are just the most beautiful that I love. So I play those all the time.
Right. So do you have any, apart from playing, I mean, there is also, what is the approach to being able to do that without injury, right? And to kind of repetitively do, what is your kind of advice
Yeah,
for that?
it's important. Like, I do different stretches and things, before you play, and if you're just getting started, it's important to do that and keep your hands nice. I have these little rings here that go on your fingers, and they just sort of help increase some of the blood flow to the finger,
Oh, interesting.
and that actually really helps with warming up. But making sure you're warming up. But the most important thing is just to make sure you do a little bit of that each day. And if you feel anything that's like a sharp shooting pain, just stop immediately. But there's kind of like there's going to be some of that stretch feeling, like if you haven't done a run in
Hmm.
a little while and you get back and start running, you feel a little bit sore, but that's kind of a good sore, right? And it's so I always say, you have to listen to your body. If something is just not working, even though you have everything in the right spot, maybe go to an alternate tuning if you're looking for those kind of sounds. But I think it just starts small and make sure that you listen as you're playing. That if anything is as a sharp shooting pain, you don't want that at all. So even those chords might look painful, but I've sat with them so at a point now that they feel comfortable, and you can get there too. It's not just again, it's not just having to be fortunate with massive fingers like Steve Vai.
Right, right. Well,
Yeah.
that's good advice. Good advice. And now onto the story, and maybe tell us a little bit about your process of as a composer of coming up with your compositions.
Yeah, I feel like it's different every time. Every time I feel like each album kind of has its own workflow to it, and I'll get inspired by books I'm reading or places I'm traveling, whether it's on the road or just around here, um with the family vacation. You have to be open to wherever inspiration can sort of strike you. And so I go back and forth on this. I always have this book next to my, let's see if I can pull this out here. I find this to be a helpful book, The War of Art. I'm sure many of you
Oh,
have read this. But
oh, okay.
what's great about this is it talks about how there's a quote in there from an old poet that says, "Inspiration is for amateurs. The rest of us just show up and do our work every day." and
Right,
I and I didn't
right.
know what that meant, So the last couple of years, I've really internalized that into my own songwriting. And when I sit down to write, I don't try to like as much sort of search for the grand, I guess, lightning that this moment happens, and all of a sudden a song is born. I play and I try to be present and listen, and each day little ideas can sort of compound. And if you just are diligent, a little bit of time, it doesn't have to be a huge chunk of time, but a little bit each day. After a while, after a month, after 2 months, 3 months, 4 months, those ideas sort of corral into raw form, and then those are what I sort of search when I'm editing to finish a composition.
Hmm.
So sometimes it's like for example, during quarantine here, um, I always have loved these chords, and this has sort of taken on a whole new meaning for me. But I love chords that have tension intervals in the middle of them. And what that means
Hmm.
is that if I have, or on the top or the bottom of the chords, but if I play this chord right here, or that interval, that's not going to impress the neighbors, and whoever's listening to you practice is going to tell you to stop immediately, right? So there's tension in that. But when you put that tension in the rest of the chord, you get something like this. And so the very thing
Uh-huh.
that's tension and isolation, when you put it back into context, it's the thing that makes it most beautiful.
Well, because you've spread out that it sounds like it's a minor second, right? And you've
Exactly.
taken it and put it down an octave.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly. And then you put that, and then I have another major second here.
yeah.
And so I love chords that have that sort of tension and resolution within them. And so
Mm.
sometimes when I'm sitting down to write, I'm literally just finding different ways to, because I just like the way it feels when I'm playing those. And then something will spark. And I have a new record coming out next year. And the first track I've called Chase the Chills, because that's sort of how the songwriting process works. And I'm probably any business, it's like really what is resonating inside you, and make sure you keep going in that direction. And so I
Yeah.
try, if I can, obviously all of our disciplines got all out of whack this year with COVID, but usually my workflow is sort of chasing the chill each day. And that might be working on a specific chord and sitting with it long enough till I find something that I really enjoy, or Like the meeting at the window was a piece I wrote when I got back from Italy. And so taking a whole experience and putting it into a song, either way, it's sort of just the simple showing up each day, your butt goes in the seat, and you just do your work. And eventually, um, you get excited. Each morning I wake up, I'm like, I'm excited to get to the shed and to pick up where I left off the other day. And so a lot of times it's just good for your own emotional health to build in a sequence like that. So I hope that wasn't
That's
too
great.
meandering of an
No,
answer.
that was really great. And I'd love to listen to some more music. We're gonna try to go to your tune Quarantine.
Cool.
Actually, I just said that wrong. I think it's called Quarantine Chords.
Quarantine Chords, yes.
Yeah, and this is a great tune. And talk a little bit about this. Ties in with your course, which is
Hmm.
called Building Colorful Chords.
Yep.
Just talk a little bit about writing that and the
Yep.
purpose of that course.
Well, when COVID first hit, obviously all of us who, when we heard the news, were kind of like, "Say what now?" You think you're
Yeah.
reading a Saturday Night Live headline, and when you really start to wrap your head around what's happening, most of my life has been lived through my guitar. Whatever happens, I somehow come back to working out things on my guitar till something feels like what I have experienced. Right? When you can translate something
Mm.
from what you've experienced to great songs will do that. And so I always try to look for those sort of moments. And so I didn't play my guitar 1 week, 2 week. I was sort of avoiding it because all the tour days got canceled. I'm like, what am I doing? So just lots of pepperoni pizza and root beer and just trying to make sense of everything. And one morning I was like, I'm gonna start again. I'm gonna go into the shed. I'm gonna grab my espresso and I'm just gonna sit down and see what happens. And so I started looking for those kinds of chords that have that tension in them, but in context, they are what make them most beautiful. And so it's just sort of a philosophical musical exercise, and I ended up just this was sort of almost an improv around that. I had a couple of ideas, and some of these chords actually are what are in the Building Colorful Chords course because I loved them so much that I wanted to, put them into a specific exercise format and share them. But this piece was born out of sort of the making sense, sort of in search of a moment of clarity during all of this craziness. And I didn't know what
Hmm.
else to call it besides quarantine chords. So
There it is.
there
All
you
right.
have it.
Well, let's hear that.
Okay.
wanted to talk about quarantine chords because what you do is you loop the reverb at the beginning before you kind of start the song. So you ring out the chord and you do some looping. But tell us about your setup, your effect setup for that tune.
Yeah, so I have one of those little ditto loopers. Start over. Oh. Start over from, okay, we'll just talk about the gear. Gotcha. Okay. So basically, I have one of these little loopers, and I got this is called an option knob, and so I can control the volume with my toe, as opposed to I used to, have to lean down and kind of, control the volume of that. But this is I sort of set up a drone with my pedals. I'll talk about it in a second, and then that goes into here. The first one is actually the radial tone bone.
Oh,
These
okay.
these are this is like the DI, this is the EQ, and then I run an effects loop through here, so then I have the other reverbs. But this is like the holy grail, man.
Can you hold that? Just hold it up on the screen.
Yep.
Everybody who knows how to take a screenshot with your computer, go ahead and do that, or get out your camera or something. That's pretty cool.
It's the radial tone bone, and I actually I had some failure with some previous gear when I was on the road, and I had one of the other guitars on the bill said, "Well, just plug into mine for the night," and my guitar never sounded like that before, and all of so I'm a big proponent of this. Everything sounds really clean, really fat, really flat, also, and then the EQ settings are like barely one notch in either direction, where some other units it's like bass all the way up, treble. These are very smooth. I love radial stuff. And then I have the Digitech Polera, and so this is like I have 3 different reverbs here. This is my grand hall reverb, and this is the hall reverb on this is awesome. This is a Lexicon hall reverb in a pedal form. So that's the Digitech Polera, and then I go from there into a Walrus Audio, and I absolutely adore Walrus Audio stuff. This is the Fathom, and this is like I guess sort of like the Mount Everest reverb you can get, and I use that in that tune. This really, really big giant decay, and what's cool is that there's an effect on and off, but also sort of a sustain. It's not like it doesn't just do a loop, it doesn't just record it, but it's almost like a piano sustain pedal where the decay goes all the way up, and then as soon as you take it off, it starts to go down. And I've tried to do that over the years with different pedals. And then I was at the NAMM show 2 years ago, and I'm like, wait, you actually have a function that does that. And so I was like, I'm in. I don't care. I'm in. And they just happen to sound unreal as well. And then I go from that into slow. And this reverb is sort of like Andromeda, like the expansion of the universe is in this reverb.
Wow.
This controls the temperature of the sun. Do you ever see those? Anyway, that's from an old school. Anyway, so this is I love this, and I can make it more like cuts off the attack of the note, or make it sort of swell. I'm in control of that with the option knob. And then I have this is the Walrus Audio ARP 87, which is a delay. Actually, I have here. They just sent me one of these where they have the slow and the ARP together. I think it's called the SLARP or the I don't
Star Wars graphics. Who wouldn't want that?
Exactly. It's so cool. So I'm loving that, and that will sort of take place of the individuals. I can just do that, but I highly recommend Walrus Audio because when you have a really good reverb, what it does is it forces you to take your time, and I feel like you listen to your chords better. You play with more patience, you play with more purity. And obviously you don't want to do that all the time, a 30-second long decay of a reverb. You don't do that all the time, but I feel like in general, it sort of can slow you down. So if you don't know what to do when you warm up as a player, you sit down and sometimes it's like, oh, okay, back to the grind. Just start with a nice reverb, play a couple of chords, and then you're there. And I feel like for me, that song Quarantine Chords was like, let's do all the reverbs and let's just go there, and that will be the tune, and so I recommend getting, any of these for anybody out there.
Great. Very cool. All right. So let's do a little giveaway.
Okay.
People have been patient, and keep on bringing your questions. By the way, I'm going to try to start asking Trevor some of your questions. Thank you for those, by the way. All right, let's see. We have some T-shirts to give away, and I'm getting the feed from my producers. Congratulations, Martin Lees and Ray Garcia. Yay, JamPlay T-shirts for you. So we'll be contacting you about where to send those. And let's give away some more stuff, and then I'll ask some questions. So let's give away, are we ready to give away some JamPlay Pro level memberships? I say these producers, like as if I had this link to the audio booth, but all right, they're not quite ready. So I'm going to go to a question.
Okay.
How about that one?
Okay.
All right. Of course, a good one. And this is from Abdias. And he asks, I'm sorry if I just butchered your name, by the way, Abdias. But he asked about your main influences and how they helped you create your sound.
Yep.
And greetings. He's from Chile. So he's
nice. Awesome. Oh, that's awesome. Thanks for tuning in. Yeah, main influences. I grew up around I listened to so much Phil Keaggy when I was a kid, and anything from the Windham Hill catalog. So Will Ackerman and George Winston and Michael Hedges, Michael Manring, Alex DeGrassi, and then getting into Don Ross years later. And then I did I did a record in 2011 on Candy Rat Records, and that has some of my absolute favorite players who've become some of my dearest friends. And so I was always heavily influenced by that, whatever's going on with that label too. But I also, my mom played a lot of Bach in the house growing up. So I listened to a lot of classical music.
Is she a guitar player or is she a pianist?
She was a pianist, but grudgingly. She didn't really enjoy playing piano too much, but she loved music, and so she always had the records playing in the house, and so I'm grateful for that. And all these years later, I have I've recorded with Will Ackerman, and he started Windham Hill Records, and we've done some projects together. And so it's interesting that some of my early memories of music are of Will's music and of Windham Hill and Michael Hedges, and all these years later to sort of like sit down and or just to play music with them on stage it's surreal, and I never take that for granted. Michael Hedges used to talk about the image of a tree, as the branches grow, the roots grow as well. So as I grow and get older and listen to all different new kinds of music, I feel like my roots are still going deep into the early Windham Hill and the classical music. I came to jazz later, so I love Pat Metheny, Pat Martino. I never really understood what was happening with Coltrane or even Alan Holdsworth, but there was something about when I listened to them play that gave me the chills. So I just kept trying to figure it, just keep listening, figure it out. So I try to be open as much as I can. It was Pat Metheny that said something along the lines. He's always been very opinionated, very controversial, but I think he said something along the lines of like 95% of every genre is garbage, but that 5% is really good, and that's found in every genre. And so that was his way of being open and yet very discerning, because each can have, there's really great disco, there's really great rap, there's really great country, there's really great all these genres, and you have to dig for some of that sometimes. And so I don't know if I totally agree with that, but that I remember at a point in my formation that really resonated with me, to learn to be open and discerning at the same time. You don't have to love everything, but if you only like what you're missing out. And so I think it's good to sort of be open as much as you can.
Right. Well, and thinking about great music born of several mashups together, and so that's right, you can learn something from all genres.
Yep.
So let's see, we're gonna take one sec to give away some JamPlay Pro memberships. We've got JamPlay Pro right now so JamPlay Pro membership, basically the pro part is that we give you these toolkits that come along with it, and actually we're giving you the 8 of the 2020 toolkits and 9 of the 2021 toolkits that are coming up. So congratulations, Thomas Beal and Gary Mackey. Congratulations, JamPlay Pro membership, and we'll be contacting you about that. All right, so now we have to talk fingernails.
Yes.
We know salons have been closed during quarantine. Perhaps it's not a problem for you because you have your own thing going on.
Exactly. I have this handy tackle box from Walmart that's got all my cool gear in it. So I have these plastic nails that I got from Amazon. They're called Mac Art nails. And they're just, these look like these little plastic tips here.
Yeah.
I put those on and I double up the surface like this. So I have I should back up and say I have the real nail, and then I reinforce that nail with these. And so, yes, you will get strange looks at the grocery store, but it's the price you pay for a good tone, you know? And when you double up the layers, and then I have a couple of different nail buffers and sandpaper to sort of just make sure that the edges are really, really smooth. And I tend to like the shape. You know, some people do like a real hard edge here, but I tend to like the shape being very round this way and very round this way, so that any contact with the string is a clean gliding sound, a very good tone. And then the specific length, you know, you have to sort of adjust to taste, I guess, or preference, you know.
Right.
And then I got this other glue called the Big Bondini. So I have a friend named Alex Anderson. He's a great guitar player, and we have sort of just kept this chat going over the last probably 2 or 3 years now of like, hey, I tried this glue. What'd you think? You know, and so we've gone back and forth, and we both have settled on this one. I used to use Gorilla Glue, which was great for a while until you spill it on your finger, and then, you know, then you have lots of panic.
Yeah,
this tends to be a little bit easier to work with, and it dries quicker. But that being said, if you don't want to go the whole nail route, I mean, you can go to a salon and get those done. I wanted to make sure I had a system that I could do when I was on the road, or obviously in quarantine now it works, where I didn't have to go to a place. I could figure out how to do it myself. So that's the system I do. But there's a really great vitamin flamenco guitar player turned me on to from Trader Joe's. It's the chewable multivitamin. It's a high potency, whatever their store brand multivitamin is. And I used to use that for a while, and that was really, really good. It had the right balance of whatever vitamins to make your nails like super strong. And so I used that for a while before I started getting into more of this. So that's an option. Or there are many, many players who don't do the nail thing at all and just flesh. And a couple of friends do that, and their tone is fantastic. So you have to find something that works for you, and don't be conned into any one specific thing. I've done it all, and I've felt, you know, a little bit adventurous going all different directions with nails, but just try one or two, find what works for you. And yeah, you'll be thankful you did it.
Good. Excellent. So speaking of that, you played an earlier tune, and you had a really great balance of harmonics and fingers, right? And can you talk a little bit about the physical harmonics of the guitar and what are harmonics, for example?
Totally.
You want to just hold up your guitar and show folks?
So basically, let me just get this on here. So basically,
oh,
I love this. Sheldon Schwartz, look him up. The guitar plays itself. I just hit play. It plays itself, you know, everything's pre-recorded. So what I love about harmonics is that bell sound, right? Like I love, it's sort of reminiscent of the kalimba sound, right? And with harmonics, basically you can do this on any stringed instrument, but the distance from the nut here to the 12th fret is the same distance from the 12th fret to the bridge here. And if you do this on any string, on a piano string, on any stringed instrument, go to the very center of the string. And that will give you 1 octave higher of if you just played it open. right? And what I do for
Mhm.
the harmonics there is I'm not really pressing it. I'm just going over the fret bar and I'm just lightly touching it. And then you get that nice sustain. And you'll notice that if you touch it and keep your finger there, it'll sort of choke it out. So you have to kind of like practice leaving the string a split second after you pick it. But this opens up some really interesting possibilities because you can use fretted notes, right? So now I'm thinking of using those harmonics as a way to sort of sustain from one passage to the next. And pianos can do that because they just have the piano sustain pedal that will work. And if you have a Walrus Audio, that can do the same
Right.
thing. But I was always interested in trying to find ways to make things sustain as long as possible, and harmonics are a way to do that. But you can also use harmonics to they're called artificial harmonics, where instead of playing 12 frets above, right, I actually touch with my index here, and then I'll pick with the thumb whatever fret I'm on. And if I go up 2 frets here, then I just have to go up 2 frets here. So you're always sort of 12 frets above. Right, and then that opens up a lot of more possibilities. And then when you can stagger, and I have a course on TrueFire, the 30 fingerstyle harmonic licks to know. We start from the ground and go all the way up, from natural harmonics to getting into the artificial, but also blending them together. Right, when you're playing picked notes and harmonics at the same time. And so there's lots of really cool things, and so many great players have developed that over the years. And I always tried to go to harmonics for musical reasons. But at first, I just did every possible exercise I could figure out or learn just to get them under my fingers so that they're always options when I'm writing, if that makes sense.
Right. And what are some good ways that people can kind of slowly begin to incorporate them into their playing without it sounding kind of forced, like now I'm going to play a harmonic,
right
kind of thing?
Yeah, the main thing is like for instance, if you play like a G chord here, right, and you go all the way up and just try to play like maybe the D, G, and B strings up here. You can strum more, but right, that's actually a G chord all the way up there. And so what I would do is practice not taking a break. So basically, if you go from here all the way up to here, when we're trying to do something that's a difficult change, this happens with chords as well as incorporating a harmonic like this. We tend to just sort of wait until the fingers are in place and then play it. And what happens is sometimes your muscle memory memorizes that gap. It memorizes the distance between here and here. And so I always think sometimes it's helpful to almost have your metronome going. So it's sort of the drill sergeant saying, like, we're leaving whether you're here or not. Make sure that this hand forces you. It's going to pick whether this was here or not. And so I would recommend just playing a chord and then trying a strum and going back and forth, and try not to take a break in between. I feel like that's a good thing that helps for your timing, but also getting harmonics clean in context and not just waiting until everything's perfect before you start. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Nice. All right. Well, let's hear another tune.
Okay.
All right. So we have. How about the? Let's see. We have the Blue Hour. We have Beautiful Chaos. What would you like to hear next?
Well,
and we can go to our pre-recording now that things seem.
Yes. Yeah. Well, I guess it depends on how much time we have left, because I think either.
Oh, that's right. We're a little over.
Well, what do you think? Should
we do?
What's your
favorite? What's your favorite?
Okay, so for me, This Beautiful Chaos is like that's a title track of a new record that I recorded last year. I was going to release it this year, and then there was something about a disease going around, a flu or something. I'm sure you've heard of that, and so that shifted everyone's timelines. But this specific song was, again, trying to make sense in when life is completely chaotic, and so I was sort of living with this tune on a totally different level this year. So it's called This Beautiful Chaos. That will be out next year. But this is the title track, and this also uses a lot of the harmonics and the melodic things. But I wrote this after I got back from a tour in China, and I was with my dear friend Callum Graham. So love you, buddy. We did the tour together, and I had this melody just in my head and some of the rhythms, and I just came home and sat with this, and this tune came out, and so I'm still getting to know it, even though I've recorded it. Now I've lived through a pandemic through it, and I'm still getting to know it. So I'm hopeful that it will be some light for you during all of this right now.
Let's hear it. Beautiful
All right,
Chaos.
there we
Trevor
go.
Gordon Hall.
for me, standard tuning is sort of a blank canvas, right? But when starting this piece, I wanted to look for an outline. So I just sort of started messing with the tuning until I felt like this is getting close to the sound or feel that I'm trying to go for. And then from there, the writing process started. So it's actually in D, A, E. So you take the D and go all the way
Okay.
up to E.
Yeah.
So just be careful when you do that.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
And then it goes F sharp, A, C sharp. And then I capo it on the fourth fret. And so the combination of those gives you this nice warm chord, but the pitch is higher because you put the capo on the fourth fret. Um, and the way that we had recorded this in the studio version, we added some extra low notes. So it's a high pitch, but we added some extra low notes under it. So I'm excited for everyone to hear that. But what you're hearing now is just sort of the straight, through my rig, and it still gets enough low end as it is, even though it's a higher pitch.
Yep.
Yeah.
Great. So take us. So you're here now. You've reached the place where you have your own style, very distinctive. And what was Trevor Gordon Hall just picks up the guitar? What were you like as a beginner? How did you get here? What was your music education like? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So I started. I have a lot of common. I think so I started around the mid 90s, and I loved what I heard in my home, but I didn't quite appreciate that because, around that time Smashing Pumpkins was on the radio and I'm like, I want to play that. That sounds cool. Um, and so I had a neighbor who had an extra guitar, and it was one of those garage sale specials that had, the strings were so high. And I've heard this story so many times, but it happened to me where you start on this and the strings were so high and I'm like, this, I want to play so badly, but it's so painful to play. So I did that for, I guess, about 6 or 8 months on that guitar. And I back up slightly. I wanted to convince my parents that I wanted to play guitar, because up to that point I had done like trumpet, a little bit of piano, and I was obviously, I bailed on those because it didn't quite I didn't find the chills the way I did once I arrived with guitar. But I actually sort of tried to make one in my basement with fishing line and wood, and see, I want to play.
I'm serious.
Invest, please, because there was in the 90s everyone was getting guitars, and then you look cool and then you learn a couple of chords and they quit. And my parents were always like, whatever you commit to, you got to do it 190%. And so I was like, see, I already built one before I even played, but so early on it was like, responding to what I loved on the radio, and then really catching my ear on the stuff that my parents were listening to. I'm like, I really like that sound, and so I ended up for a year self-taught, and then I went to a music store. This was in Rochester, New York, Webster,
Yeah.
New York.
Yeah.
And so I grew up there before I moved to the Philly area, and I went to a music store. Then I went to a school of music there. I came down and went to another school of music here.
Did you do something at Eastman?
It was called Hochstein.
Okay.
The Hochstein School of Music. I didn't do anything at Eastman specifically. But that was like the place, it's the place worldwide, but also in Rochester, that was like, go to Eastman. But I ended up moving when I was around 13 or 14. I started high school when I moved to the Philadelphia area. So I missed some of the higher education musical stuff in New York. But then I started studying with a professor at the university my dad was teaching at. And this guy named Don Reese, and he was classical jazz, Holdsworth, Coltrane, Bach, Villalobos. We just did everything, and it was always, what I appreciated about that was it was never, here's the road. If you want to do this, it's like earning your black belt. I don't care if you like it or hate it. This is what you got to do. It was always play. It was always, here's what's awesome and what is happening in Bach's lines. Look at the first note of each measure, listen to what Holdsworth is doing and let's learn some of his. It was always this play. And I'm forever indebted to that, because that was exactly what my experience of music was, and my desire to just explore. Michael Hedges talks about being a hunter-gatherer, going into all these different styles and sort of taking something that you can put into your own mixture amalgamation, so I took lessons from him, and by the time I was ready to graduate high school, um, I was going to go to school for music, and I took a couple. I wanted to go to the Musicians Institute in LA. That was my dream. Go there because you got to go to LA, or else what are you doing with your life, right? If you play guitar, get there. And so my dad was teaching at a school where we lived, in Philly here. And so I just decided to do some basic courses there, and then I hit a philosophy course, and I was like, what's going on here? I love this. And it gave me that same feeling that I would get when I'm studying Bach or listening to the Beatles or Beach Boys harmonies. And so I did almost kind of a double, not quite a double major, but I was in jazz band. I was still taking private lessons. I'm working on fingerstyle, developing that, and I'm also doing philosophy papers, right? And so all of that together became this sort of like creative cycle. I would get into studying a new idea that really excited me, and that would make me try to search for that feeling on the fretboard in a new chord or a new progression. And so it started this sort of lifelong process that I still use of learning to take influences outside of music and bring them into that. So my education wasn't, I don't have a degree in music, but I studied a lot of that literature throughout high school, and then throughout college. I tried to stay up as much as I could and go through my Villalobos and my Bach and still do jazz band. And so I still tried to do that, but my teacher was always like, you have to teach yourself. As many years as I teach you, you're still going to have to go off on your own. So yeah, that was kind of like I felt like there were so many points. Sometimes you don't realize you're on the right path until you look back on reflection.
Yeah.
And every time I reflect on those forming years, I'm like, man, I couldn't have charted that out better, because I felt like that's where I needed to be. Really great players go to Berkeley, really great players go to LA, really great players go to all kinds of schools. Your education is what you make it. It's not just the it's not just the environment. It's your drive and your passion, your will, and chasing your chills. And so I look back and I think, sometimes should I have done a little bit more, go back to school for music and do all that. But I think I'm where I should be, and embracing my story has given me freedom. So I just want to encourage anybody else, like, if you didn't come to jazz when you were 3 years old and you didn't, grow up with all the influences you're supposed to have, take control of your own story. What are the influences you do have? And start to build your style and your passion from those. Because again, that whole, as you grow, the roots grow as well. Some of my roots are punk rock, so I bring all of that into it. You don't have to worry. So, yeah.
That's great. That is great. And, it's interesting because now that you have been a professional, do you think of it as, quote, practice? Do you think of it as teaching yourself, always striving for something else, right? New. Because Ray asks about, for instance, your routine or your practice, and how did you come to whatever you are doing now? And how would you also advise, especially folks who are getting into guitar, let's say, and things are hard?
Yeah.
And there may be frustrations. What do you advise for them to think about for themselves in getting better?
I've fought with this for so many years, because most people say, well, you have to practice. You want to get better, you got to put in the time. And then that's it. The conversation is done. Okay, how? What do I do? What do I work on? For how long? All of that. And I remember reading this interview when I was young that Tommy Emmanuel practiced 13 hours a day. And I'm like, well, then I don't have a shot, because I can't do 13, 14 hours a day, But I think it's most important, if try to find a system that works for your personality temperament. So the way that I have the system, I talk about this in my course, crafting fingerstyle melodies with JamPlay. That course, I talk about my approach here. It's called structured spontaneity. And so I remember when I was in high school, I got really, really diligent about trying to do like 3 to 4 hour practice block broken up into 2-minute increments, right? I'm doing this at this speed, and then I'm doing the pick, then I'm switching. And I had this like massively consistent, and like it covered everything you could. And like a few weeks of that, you're just burned out, right? Your will to play is just zapped because you're sort of like you're at boot camp. You just got to tough it
Ah,
out, you know?
right.
And I don't think that anyone who has that, they're no match for someone who is constantly got the flame going, right? They're constantly falling in love with
Right.
it over and over. So there's the super structured. I realize that it zapped my will to play. But when you're spontaneous, when you sit down and just noodle, that can be fun up until like 20, 25 minutes. And nowadays it's like, oh, okay, the ding happens, what's happening, you know, and then you doom scroll for a little while. But I found that just going spontaneous, I wasn't getting results. I wasn't really growing. So I have the system I call structured spontaneity, and this sort of just formed from different things over the years. And I just take a notebook like this, and I will write out, depending on whatever time I have that day. If you have 30 minutes, if you have an hour, if you have 20 minutes, what's important is to make sure you plan what you're going to work on that day. But what I recommend, and I don't have this up, I had it in my old studio, but I would sort of make like a master list of the things that I want to work on. So I'd take stock, and I'm like, I'm working on this song, I'm working on this scale, put it all down,
Mm-hmm.
and I sort of see that as the buffet. And every day when I sit down, given the time that I have, I just choose items from that list, what I feel like I'm drawn to, right? And I just put it out into like maybe 20 minutes or 10-minute increments, just enough so that if it's something you hate, if it's like eating your musical vegetables, it's over in a couple minutes anyway. But there's lots of things that you will be excited to work on. And so what I found is that instead of sitting down and saying, I'm going to learn this and I'm going to take an hour and muscle through it, I break things down into small increments each day. And then when the time comes up, cut myself off, because that
Mm.
forces me to be excited about picking it up again tomorrow. So in general, you have to find a way that keeps your will to play alive. Not saying that you won't go through burnout phases. We can talk about that, of course. But in general, don't just put in your time. Really make sure that your time is spent falling in love with it over and over again. And then growth comes from that. And then you get better, and then you're more comfortable with the fretboard. Then you play with less tension because you're not bracing for impact, because you think, you're going to get punched in boxing class or something. You know what I mean? It's a bad analogy, but you learn to be more relaxed, and you fall in love with that. And so all that to say that sort of structure, spontaneity, sometimes if I'm prepping for tour, I go a little bit more, swing the pendulum towards the structure side. Sometimes when I'm feeling like in a pandemic, I go more towards the spontaneity side, and just find what will work. Sometimes you want results,
Mm.
but sometimes you just want to sit down and play. And that's important to do. So that structured spontaneity, that's what I call that. Uh-oh, I'm muted.
Here we go. Well, that makes sense, because often when I meet musicians, or I meet people who find out that I'm a musician or whatever, and they say, "Oh, I always wanted to be. I took lessons when I was young. I wish I hadn't given it up."
Yes.
And I'll say, "Well, first of all, it's never too late."
Yep.
Right? But second, they'll have a story about how somebody made them do something like that. And when you have that kind of, certainly we have moments where we have to buckle down and we want to overcome, we have to practice little by little, whatever. But a negative experience, is not going to help you in the long run.
Yep.
To be in love with what you're doing. So I think what you're saying and putting out to people as a way to think about it is super helpful.
It makes it your own. So even if you had a negative experience, really thinking about how your approach will help you make peace with that experience, so you don't live in reaction to it. You embrace it as part of your story.
Right. Great. All right, let's listen to another tune. If you could talk about this one too. This is the Blue Hour.
Yes. Yep. So I went to the Martin factory to meet Dick Boak. Martin Guitar, has been there for like 43 years. He just retired a couple of years ago. And we were filming some videos, and then he said, I got the keys. Do you want to play any guitar in the Martin Museum? And I was like, what? So we played all these different guitars and these pre-World War II Martins. And then I landed on this guitar that looked like this tiny little thing. And I was like, well, tell me the story here. And he said that he designed it for Sting, and Sting used it on a couple of records, and then he gave it back to the factory. And I was like, oh, interesting. And so I just picked up the guitar and I strummed this chord, which is one of my favorites, but it sounded like nothing I'd ever heard before. And it's because it was in a sort of Nashville tuning. What that means is that if you look at a 12-string guitar, it's as if you only put the high octave strings, the thinner strings, on all of them. So that G, right, is now going to be the highest pitch. So everything becomes this really interesting way of looking at the guitar. It's like your standard chords will work, but they sound different, and it messes with how you formulate a melody in different voicings. And so I went home with that, and I always love that part of the day right before the sun comes up and right after the sun goes down, where everything's blue. And so that chord and that sound, it's the blue hour. So that's what this tune is about. I hope you enjoy it.
All right, let's take a listen.
Cool.
thank you so much for joining us, Trevor.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure. Thank you.
Hey, so we're going to do some last giveaways here. And I also want to mention, we also have Amber Russell coming up on the 22nd, and she has a lot of stories, is just amazing player too. So we're super lucky to have these artists hanging out with us. So let me give away some stuff right now. We have got a Boss RC1 looper. And let's see who's getting this tonight. Dum, da, da, dum. David Walbrook. The looper is yours. Looper is yours. Put that on a great reverb and, you know, bliss out. Bliss out. Trevor, you want to talk us out a little bit about the 2 courses that you're offering right now?
Yep. So I have the at JamPlay, the first one was crafting fingerstyle melodies. That's sort of the master course from like the beginning of, you know, finger picking and then all the way up to walking through some of the songs that I played tonight. And then the one after that is specifically focused on chords, building colorful chords, and just how you get a sense of when you hear a chord, what makes that sound and how to practice moving that around the fretboard. So those are the 2 main ones. We have some other ones, I think, in production now that will be coming out shortly that are more in the fingerstyle vein. But yeah, and then a couple on TrueFire, 30 fingerstyle licks and 30 harmonic fingerstyle licks. So there's so much ground to cover. So I hope that you can hang out with me on one or many of those, because I have a blast making them. I love filming them. I love working with you guys. And people will send me messages like, hey, in lesson 13 and measure 46, what did you do with your pinky? And you know what? I love that, and I am happy to answer all those questions. So I'm always available as well.
That is awesome. That's great. All right. And I also want to mention that we've been recording this. We're going to be trimming down the video, and we're going to make it available to you. So if you'd like to go back through and watch what Trevor is doing or listen to our conversation, we will email you, because you're all registered. So we'll let you know when that's posted and where that's posted. But for now, Trevor, thank you so much for spending time with us. It was really, really my pleasure to talk with you and learn so much about you and the music.
Oh, it's a pleasure. Thank you so much for having me, and we'll do it again, hopefully. This is great.
All right, great. And thanks everybody for sticking with us for JamPlay Live, and we hope to see you real soon, or see you at jamplay.com. Bye-bye. Thanks.